The morning the porch went silent, the whole town felt it. For 43 years, the white farmhouse at the edge of Maple Grove had breathed like a living thing. The porch creaked with laughter, the screen door snapped shut with summer energy, and the scent of cinnamon and baked apples drifted down Willow Road like a promise that everything, no matter how hard, would somehow turn out all right. But on the morning after Harold Brooks was buried, the rocking chair did not move. And for the first time in half a century, Grandma Eleanor Ellie Brooks sat alone. The sky over Maple Grove, Ohio, looked too wide without Harold standing beside her. Ellie adjusted the shawl over her shoulders and stared at the cornfields stretching beyond her property line. They shimmered gold under the early September sun, the same way they had the day she and Harold moved here in 1968. Back then, the paint on the farmhouse had been fresh. The porch boards had been smooth. Their future had been enormous. Now the paint peeled in soft curls, and the house felt like it was holding its breath. Cars passed slowly that morning. Neighbors waved gently, as if loud gestures might shatter something fragile. A casserole dish sat cooling on her kitchen counter, another offering from someone who didn't quite know what to say. Her children had already returned to their lives. Rebecca back to Chicago. Thomas back to Seattle. They had hugged her tightly at the airport. "You can always move closer to us, Mom," Rebecca had said. Ellie had smiled the way mothers do when they are determined not to cry. But this porch was not just wood and nails. It was history. In Maple Grove, the Brooks porch wasn't just a porch. It was where lemonade stands turned into business lessons. Teenagers confessed college fears. Newlyweds received advice. Farmers discussed weather patterns. And children learned how to peel apples without slicing their thumbs. Ellie had been a schoolteacher for 35 years at Maple Grove Elementary. Generations of students still called her Mrs. Brooks, even at the grocery store. Harold used to joke that the porch was Ellie's second classroom. Now the chalkboard in her kitchen remained blank. It sounds like one coffee cup instead of two. No second set of boots by the door. A clock ticking too loudly at 2:17 a.m. Wind rattling porch railings that used to echo with conversation. That first week alone, Ellie baked out of habit. Apple pie on Monday. Peach cobbler on Wednesday. Cornbread on Friday. But when she sliced the pie, no one asked for the corner piece. No one pretended to steal extra whipped cream. She wrapped half of it in foil and left it untouched. 3 days after Harold's funeral, a black SUV rolled slowly past her house. It didn't belong. Maple Grove traffic consisted of pickup trucks and minivans, not tinted windows and polished chrome. The SUV stopped briefly at the edge of her property. A man in a navy suit stepped out, holding a clipboard. He looked at the land the way someone studies a menu, calculating. Ellie watched from behind her curtains. He smiled. Not kindly. The SUV drove away. But the silence that followed was different now. He would be back. 2 weeks later, a moving truck rattled up to the abandoned house next door. Ellie hadn't seen that house occupied in years. After old Mr. Hendricks passed, the property had fallen into neglect. Weeds climbed the porch steps. Paint faded to gray surrender. But now, a woman climbed out of the driver's side of a dusty sedan. She looked tired but determined. Early 30s. Brown hair pulled into a messy bun. And from the passenger side emerged a boy. He carried a single box labeled, books. He looked around like someone who didn't expect to stay long. Ellie felt something stir inside her chest. Curiosity. Hope. Maybe both. Caleb. She learned his name the next morning. The boy was sitting on the low wooden fence separating their yards, staring at the cornfields. Ellie stepped onto her porch holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "Hot one today," she called gently. He turned, startled. His eyes were cautious. "City eyes." "Yes, ma'am." She walked slowly toward the fence. "I'm Eleanor Brooks. But most folks around here call me Grandma Ellie." He hesitated. "Caleb," she repeated warmly. "You look like someone who appreciates lemonade." He glanced back toward his house. My mom's unpacking. Well, Ellie smiled. She'll unpack better knowing you're hydrated. The corner of his mouth twitched. He accepted the glass. Over the next week, Ellie noticed things. Caleb didn't roam freely like Maple Grove children usually did. He didn't ride bikes down Willow Road. He didn't chase fireflies at dusk. He read. He watched. He stayed close to the house. One afternoon, she overheard two boys from town whispering near the mailbox. That's the kid from Columbus. He talks weird. He thinks he's better than us. Ellie's jaw tightened. Children could be cruel in ways adults forgot. That evening, she baked another apple pie. And this time, she carried it next door. Caleb opened the door. His mother appeared behind him, wiping her hands on her jeans. Oh. Hi, I'm sorry. We haven't properly introduced ourselves. Ellie extended the pie. Welcome to Maple Grove. I figured you might not have found your baking pans yet. The woman laughed, relieved. I'm Maria Rivera, and you are officially our favorite neighbor. Inside, the house smelled like cardboard and uncertainty. Caleb sat at the small kitchen table as Ellie sliced the pie. He took one bite. His eyes widened. This is insane. Ellie pretended to gasp. Insane? That sounds serious. He swallowed quickly. I mean, in a good way. Maria smiled for the first time that week. And in that small kitchen, something invisible shifted. Loneliness loosened its grip. That night, Ellie sat back on her porch. The rocking chair creaked again. Not from wind, but from movement. She watched the Rivera house glow softly under porch light. For the first time since Harold's funeral, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. She whispered into the evening air. Well, Harold, looks like we've got work to do. The cornfields rustled as if in agreement. And somewhere down Willow Road, the black SUV returned. Watching.
The black SUV returned on a Tuesday. It rolled up Willow Road like it owned the dust beneath its tires. Ellie saw it from her porch. She had just finished trimming the late summer roses Harold planted 20 years ago. The air smelled like soil and fading heat. Caleb was kneeling beside her, carefully patting dirt around a tomato plant she insisted still had one good harvest left. That one needs patience, she'd told him. Caleb glanced up as the SUV door opened. The man in the navy suit stepped out again, polished shoes, crisp tie, a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Afternoon," he called smoothly. Ellie rose slowly, brushing soil from her palms. "Afternoon." He approached with the confidence of someone used to being agreed with. "Mrs. Brooks, I presume?" "You presume correct." He chuckled politely. "My name is Daniel Mercer. I represent Mercer Development Group." Caleb stood, instinctively moving closer to Ellie. Mercer gestured broadly to the open land behind her farmhouse. "You're sitting on prime acreage." Ellie didn't respond. He continued, "Our firm is investing in Maple Grove's future. Retail expansion, job opportunities, a shopping plaza. We've already secured several surrounding properties." Caleb's brow furrowed. "Surrounding properties?" Ellie's voice stayed steady. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because your land is central to the project." There it was. The reason for the smile, and he handed her a folder. Inside sat an offer that could buy comfort for the rest of her life. More money than she had ever seen in one place. Mercer leaned in slightly. "You could move closer to your children, downsize, relax, let progress take care of the rest." Ellie closed the folder. "Mr. Mercer," she said evenly, This porch has outlasted 3 recessions, 2 wars, and disco. I don't think it needs rescuing. Caleb tried not to grin. Mercer's smile thinned. I'd encourage you to consider it carefully. He returned to the sous vide, and the dust it left behind felt heavier than before. Maple Grove was small enough that secrets lasted about 12 minutes. By Wednesday morning, the grocery store hummed with whispers. They're building a plaza. I heard a chain supermarket's coming. Jobs for the kids. Property taxes will go up. At the hardware store, old Mr. Jenkins shook his head. Progress, he muttered. That's what they always call it. By Thursday evening, a community information meeting had been scheduled at Town Hall. Mercer Development was moving quickly. Meanwhile, school had not been kind. Caleb sat alone at lunch most days. He used words like literally and ironically, which Maple Grove boys translated as weird. On Friday afternoon, Ellie noticed him walking home slower than usual. His backpack hung low. You look like a storm cloud, she observed gently. He hesitated. It's nothing. She waited. Eventually, he said quietly, they said my mom only moved here because we couldn't afford Columbus anymore. Ellie's jaw tightened. Children repeat what they hear, she said softly, and sometimes grown-ups say foolish things. He looked at the farmhouse. They say this place is going to get knocked down anyway. The words landed like stones. Ellie knelt beside him in the garden. Let me tell you something about this house, she said firmly. It was built by Harold's grandfather in 1919. Every board was cut by hand, every nail hammered with intention. This house has survived dust storms and bank failures. She looked him straight in the eye. And it's not going anywhere without a fight. Something flickered in Caleb's expression. Hope. The meeting overflowed into the hallway. Mercer stood at the front with glossy renderings displayed on an easel. Bright storefronts. Neon signs. A large parking lot where cornfields currently swayed. This development, Mercer announced smoothly, will modernize Maple Grove. Murmurs filled the room. A young father stood first. We need jobs. An older woman countered. We need community. Another voice. My property value would triple. Ellie rose slowly from her folding chair. The room quieted. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I taught half of you to read, she began calmly, so I trust you can read between the lines. A ripple of laughter. She continued. This isn't about a grocery store. It's about what we become when we sell what makes us different. Mercer folded his arms. Mrs. Brooks' progress doesn't erase community. No, she agreed, but parking lots do. The room broke into uneasy applause. But not everyone clapped. Some faces were calculating. Some were already convinced. The town was splitting. The following Monday, Mercer returned. This time he didn't smile. Mrs. Brooks, I'll be direct. If you refuse, the plaza will simply be built around you. Ellie sipped her iced tea. That would look strange. Developers are not concerned with strange. He slid a revised offer across the porch table. Higher. Much higher. You're being sentimental, he said quietly. Your children aren't coming back. You're alone out here. The word lingered. Alone. Caleb stepped onto the porch just then. Mercer noticed him. "Ah," he said smoothly. "The future generation. Wouldn't you prefer a movie theater over cornfields?" Caleb's hands clenched. "I like cornfields." Mercer gave a thin smile. "You'll grow out of that." He stood. "Think carefully, Mrs. Brooks. This town is changing with or without you." The SUV disappeared again. But this time it left something sharper behind. Pressure. That evening, Ellie did something she hadn't done since Harold passed. She called her granddaughter Sophie. Sophie was 22, lived in Chicago, knew things about the internet. Ellie pretended to understand. After listening carefully, Sophie said, "Grandma, this could actually be huge." "I'm not interested in being huge." "You don't have to be, but your story is..." Within 24 hours, Sophie had posted photos of the farmhouse porch. She wrote, "My grandma's home in Maple Grove is about to be bulldozed for a strip mall. This porch has served generations. Let's remind people what community looks like." The post spread faster than Ellie could process. By Wednesday, strangers were commenting. By Thursday, local news called. By Friday, a reporter stood at the edge of Willow Road with a camera. Ellie blinked at the attention. Caleb grinned like he'd discovered magic. More children began stopping by the porch. At first out of curiosity, then out of interest. Ellie started a Saturday garden club. "Every good town," she told them, handing out gloves, "needs roots." Caleb took leadership naturally, showing younger kids how to plant tomatoes, explaining soil depth, repeating Ellie's wisdom like scripture. The boys who had teased him began showing up too. "It's hard to mock someone holding a shovel beside you." One evening, Mercer returned a third time. This time, there was no offer. Just information. "You've turned this into a spectacle," he said coldly. Ellie rocked gently. "I prefer conversation." "You're stalling inevitable progress." "No," she corrected. "I'm reminding people what they're trading." He leaned closer. "If this project fails, the investors will withdraw. Maple Grove will stagnate. And when that happens, remember you chose nostalgia over opportunity." Ellie met his stare. "Opportunity doesn't require erasing history." For the first time, Mercer looked uncertain. Not defeated, but rattled. Later that night, Ellie sat alone on the porch. The media attention was growing. The town was dividing. Some neighbors avoided eye contact now. She could feel the strain. Caleb joined her quietly. "You ever get scared?" he asked. "All the time," she admitted. "Then why don't you stop?" She smiled faintly. "Because fear isn't always a stop sign. Sometimes it's proof something matters." He nodded slowly. The cornfields rustled again. But this time the wind carried tension. Maple Grove was changing. And not everyone would stand with her. Somewhere in town, signatures were being gathered. Petitions circulated. Whispers grew sharper. And though Ellie didn't know it yet, someone close to her was about to betray the porch she was fighting to save. A ripple of laughter. She continued, "This isn't about a grocery store. It's about what we become when we sell what makes us different." Mercer folded his arms. "Mrs. Brooks, progress doesn't erase community." "No," she agreed, "but parking lots do." The room broke into uneasy applause. But not everyone clapped. Some faces were calculating. Some were already convinced. The town was splitting. The following Monday, Mercer returned. This time he didn't smile. "Mrs. Brooks, I'll be direct. If you refuse, the plaza will simply be built around you." Ellie sipped her iced tea. "That would look strange." "Developers are not concerned with strange." He slid a revised offer across the porch table. "Higher." "Much higher?" "You're being sentimental," he said quietly. "Your children aren't coming back. You're alone out here." The word lingered. Alone. Caleb stepped onto the porch just then. Mercer noticed him. "Ah," he said smoothly. "The future generation. Wouldn't you prefer a movie theater over cornfields?" Caleb's hands clenched. "I like cornfields." Mercer gave a thin smile. "You'll grow out of that." He stood. "Think carefully, Mrs. Brooks. This town is changing with or without you." The SUV disappeared again. But this time it left something sharper behind. Pressure. That evening, Ellie did something she hadn't done since Harold passed. She called her granddaughter Sophie. Sophie was 22, lived in Chicago, knew things about the internet. Ellie pretended to understand. After listening carefully, Sophie said, "Grandma, this could actually be huge." "I'm not interested in being huge." "You don't have to be, but your story is..." Within 24 hours, Sophie had posted photos of the farmhouse porch. She wrote, "My grandma's home in Maple Grove is about to be bulldozed for a strip mall. This porch has served generations. Let's remind people what community looks like." The post spread faster than Ellie could process. By Wednesday, strangers were commenting. By Thursday, local news called. By Friday, a reporter stood at the edge of Willow Road with a camera. Ellie blinked at the attention. Caleb grinned like he'd discovered magic. More children began stopping by the porch. At first out of curiosity, then out of interest. Ellie started a Saturday garden club. "Every good town," she told them, handing out gloves, "needs roots." Caleb took leadership naturally, showing younger kids how to plant tomatoes, explaining soil depth, repeating Ellie's wisdom like scripture. The boys who had teased him began showing up too. "It's hard to mock someone holding a shovel beside you." One evening, Mercer returned a third time. This time, there was no offer. Just information. "You've turned this into a spectacle," he said coldly. Ellie rocked gently. "I prefer conversation." "You're stalling inevitable progress." "No," she corrected. "I'm reminding people what they're trading." He leaned closer. "If this project fails, the investors will withdraw. Maple Grove will stagnate. And when that happens, remember you chose nostalgia over opportunity." Ellie met his stare. Opportunity doesn't require erasing history. For the first time, Mercer looked uncertain. Not defeated, but rattled. Later that night, Ellie sat alone on the porch. The media attention was growing. The town was dividing. Some neighbors avoided eye contact now. She could feel the strain. Caleb joined her quietly. "You ever get scared?" he asked. "All the time," she admitted. "Then why don't you stop?" She smiled faintly. "Because fear isn't always a stop sign. Sometimes it's proof something matters." He nodded slowly. The cornfields rustled again. But this time the wind carried tension. Maple Grove was changing. And not everyone would stand with her. Somewhere in town, signatures were being gathered. Petitions circulated. Whispers grew sharper. And though Ellie didn't know it yet, someone close to her was about to betray the porch she was fighting to save. The following week, Ellie received a certified letter. Mercer Development had filled a proposal to rezone the surrounding properties. If approved, her farmhouse would sit isolated in a commercial district. Property taxes would increase. Utilities would shift. Traffic patterns would change. They weren't bulldozing her. They were squeezing her. Caleb read the letter over her shoulder. They're trying to make it impossible. Ellie nodded slowly. They're trying to make it uncomfortable. Instead of retreating, Ellie did what she had always done. She opened her porch. Saturday afternoon, she placed lemonade on the railing. Folded chairs lined the yard, and neighbors came, some cautiously, some defiantly. Even a few who had signed the petition. Ellie stood, not with anger but clarity. I won't pretend change isn't necessary, she began, but change without conversation becomes force. She gestured to the fields. This land doesn't just belong to me, it belongs to memory, to stories, to children who haven't been born yet. A farmer spoke up. What's the alternative? Ellie smiled faintly. Community-owned development, local businesses, renovation instead of replacement. Murmurs of interest. Mercer's proposal wasn't the only option. It was just the loudest. That night, someone spray-painted across Ellie's fence. Caleb saw it first. His fists clenched. Ellie studied the words quietly. Then she handed him a bucket. We repaint tomorrow. Aren't you mad? He demanded. Oh, I'm furious, she said calmly. But anger is energy. We choose how to spend it. 2 days later, a rental car pulled into the driveway. Thomas stepped out. He looked older than she remembered. Guilt sat heavily on his shoulders. I shouldn't have signed without talking to you, he admitted. Ellie didn't rush to forgive. She simply waited. I was thinking about investments, about retirement, about numbers. He looked at the porch. I forgot about meaning. She studied her son carefully. Why now? He swallowed. I saw the video. Caleb's speech had gone viral. Thousands had viewed it. Comments poured in. Protect the porch. Save Maple Grove. Community matters. Thomas exhaled slowly. Dad built that swing, he said quietly, nodding toward the old oak. Yes, Ellie replied. And I almost signed it away. The silence between them shifted. Not erased, but softened. City Council scheduled the rezoning vote for the following Tuesday. The entire town showed up. Mercer presented charts, economic forecasts, projected revenue. Then Ellie stood. She didn't hold notes. I am not against growth, she said clearly. I am against forgetting. She gestured toward Caleb standing beside Maria. This town welcomed a family who needed a second chance, not because we had a plaza, but because we had a porch. She turned to the council. If we trade our identity for convenience, we won't recognize ourselves in 10 years. The vote began. One by one. Yes. No. Yes. No. The final count came down to one council member. A woman Ellie had once taught in 3rd grade. She looked at Ellie with moist eyes, then cast her vote. Rezoning denied. The room erupted. Mercer's expression hardened, not defeated but recalculating. As the crowd celebrated, he approached Ellie one final time. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Ellie met his gaze steadily. "It never is." Weeks later, the graffiti had long been painted over. The garden thrived. Local investors began discussing small business grants. Thomas extended his stay. Caleb walked taller at school. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the cornfields, Ellie sat in her rocking chair once more. But this time, the porch wasn't silent. Children laughed. Neighbors talked. The screen door snapped shut behind Maria carrying fresh lemonade. Caleb sat at Ellie's feet, sketching plans for expanding the garden. Ellie closed her eyes briefly. Harold would have liked this. The wind rustled through the fields. Not as tension now, but as promise. She leaned back gently. The porch creaked. Alive again. The porch didn't win because it was strong. It won because people remembered why it mattered. And sometimes remembering is the bravest act of all. After the council vote, Maple Grove didn't erupt into perfection. It exhaled. Mercer Development withdrew quietly over the following months. Investors shifted to larger towns with fewer questions and less resistance. The black SUV never returned to Willow Road. But something more important stayed. Conversation. Where once there had been whispers and division, now there were potlucks and planning boards. The abandoned storefront on Main Street reopened as a cooperative market. Local farmers sold produce there instead of shipping everything to larger distributors. Teenagers worked the register after school. The town didn't reject growth. It redefined it. Caleb no longer walked home with his head down. He walked with purpose. The boys who once teased him now asked about composting and tomato yields. It turned out leadership wasn't about being loud, it was about being steady. One afternoon, Ellie found him on the porch sketching again. "What's that?" she asked. "A blueprint." "For?" "A bigger garden, and maybe benches, so more people can sit." Ellie smiled. "You're thinking long term." He shrugged. "Someone has to." She saw it clearly then. The porch hadn't just saved him. He had saved it right back. Thomas extended his stay longer than planned. He repaired loose boards on the porch, repainted the fence, installed better lighting along the walkway. One evening, as they sanded the old porch swing together, he said quietly, "I thought success meant leaving." Ellie continued brushing varnish carefully. "And now?" "I think it might mean staying connected." She didn't say "I told you so." She simply handed him another brush. Forgiveness, she believed, was strongest when spoken through action. That autumn, Maple Grove hosted its first harvest festival in over a decade. Not sponsored by a corporation. Not branded. Just neighbors. Long wooden tables lined Willow Road. Lanterns hung from trees. Music drifted across the fields. Ellie's apple pies sold out before sunset. Caleb ran the vegetable stand with children from the garden club. Maria coordinated volunteers with confident ease. And when night fell, someone tapped a spoon against a glass. They asked Ellie to speak. She stood slowly, heart steady. "I didn't fight for a house," she began. "I fought for a habit." The crowd leaned in. The habit of sitting together, of disagreeing face to face, of knowing your neighbor's name. She looked at Caleb. And of making room for someone new. Applause swelled, not explosive, but full. Warm. Lasting. Time moved as it always does. Winter arrived gently that year. Snow settled over the cornfields like a soft blanket of quiet. Ellie's steps slowed with the season. Age had begun whispering louder in her joints. Mornings required more patience. Caleb noticed. He shoveled her walkway before school. Brought soup on evenings. Maria worked late. Fixed the screen door that still snapped too sharply. One snowy afternoon, Ellie called him onto the porch. They sat wrapped in blankets. "Do you know what a promise is?" she asked. He nodded cautiously. "It's something you keep." "Yes," she said, "even when it's inconvenient, even when it's hard." She looked at the fields now resting under frost. "This porch was a promise your grandfather and I made to always make room." He swallowed. "I'll keep it," he said quietly. She believed him. That spring, Ellie wrote a letter. Not because she was dying, but because she understood time. She placed it inside a wooden recipe box along with her apple pie instructions, handwritten, flour-stained, precise. The letter was addressed simply. It spoke of seasons, of laughter, of standing firm without hardening, of progress that includes, not replaces. She didn't know when it would be read. Only that one day it would. Time does not ask permission. It moves. Caleb grew taller, stronger. Left for college but returned often. Maple Grove remained imperfect, evolving carefully, thoughtfully. The porch endured storms, sun, and celebration. And one quiet summer evening, many years later, Caleb, now grown, sat in the same rocking chair Ellie once had. Children played in the yard. The garden flourished wider than ever. The cooperative market thrived downtown. He held a folded, worn letter in his hand. He had found it tucked inside the recipe box after Ellie passed peacefully in her sleep at 91. The town had gathered for her memorial, not in a church, but on the porch. He unfolded the final lines once more. "If you're reading this, then the porch is still standing. That means you chose people over convenience, conversation over comfort, roots over shortcuts. Keep choosing that." Caleb looked out over Willow Road. Cars passed slowly. Neighbors waved. The porch creaked beneath him, not with age, but with life. A little girl tugged his sleeve. "Mr. Caleb, can you help me plant tomatoes?" He smiled softly. "Of course." He rose, stepping down into the garden where new hands waited. The promise continued. Not because it was easy, but because someone had once refused to let it disappear. And in Maple Grove, Ohio, the porch never went silent again.